Good morning and welcome to Constructionline Talks. And today, just to let you know, those that are joining for the first time, the talk will be recorded and you'll receive a link via email. If you do have any questions as we go through, then please pop them into the chat. We'll try and answer them as we go through the presentation. Any that we don't get to, then we'll cover in the wrap-up Q&A session at the end. We think the session should probably take somewhere between 30 and 40 minutes, depending on the number of questions that we get. And so let's get started. So today's topic is material suppliers. We'd like to introduce to you a new accreditation standard from Constructionline that's been developed in collaboration with industry. The standard supports compliance and risk management for those members of your supply chain that are supplying materials. It's been a very important topic for many of our contractor members, and thank you to those that actually supported and contributed through the development of the question set and worked together with Tom. I'm very pleased to say that we've got a member of that steering group joining us this morning to share their experience. That's Trish from BAM. And let's kick off.
Great, thank you, Mike. So what we'll do is we're going to go through a bit of background as to what we've got. For those of you who've already spoken to about this initiative, this is now launched and live. What we'd like to do is not just show you the areas that we're looking to address through this question set, we'll also give you a demo so you can see what's in our production systems, what we have live today. So a few points we'll cover off, a demonstration and Q&A. So as Mike said at the beginning, any questions you've got, there's a Q&A function. We'll try and address them at the time, but if not, there will be a section at the end that we can specifically look at any questions that you've raised. So the first thing I would say is this has been built in collaboration. So thank you, Trish, for joining us today. We've spoken to a number of main contractors about this. So this isn't a Constructionline initiative. This is basically built in the same way that we have the whole new portal. It's been done in consultation with our customers, and it's a question set that's very much owned by our customers. So the important point there really being is that, yes, we built this question set. It's based on feedback that we've had. We've had various consultations and feedback, but that's an ongoing process. So as and when trends change or requirements or policy changes, for example, this will be a dynamic thing. So our expectation fully is that as and when those changes happen, this question sets will mold to meet the changing needs of your businesses. So what we'll do is going to go through kind of some of the backgrounds around material suppliers, and then we'll look at some of the key topics, and then we'll have a look at the demonstration. So I mean, the first point really is that this is our launch into the a sort of a material specific plan. So even though we've got a lot of history managing supply chains on behalf of main contractors, the majority of suppliers that we have today are subcontractors, and that means that some of those benefits that you'll enjoy from using a platform such as ours that we've recently developed, you may potentially have dual process that you manage. So you'll have your subcontractors in one place in our portal, in the Constructionline portal, but then you'll have maybe a separate process for your subcontractors, and that's what we're looking to change. The question set itself is specific for subcontractors, and it's a very dynamic question set. So one of the key things that we've done here is develop something that means that when we're asking questions of a supplier, they're specific, they're suitable for that supplier. So we've removed any questions that were subcontractor focused from the question set, and we've also added sections, extra questions where applicable around things like environmental, carbon management, etc., which we'll go to in a bit more depth. But we've also tried to make the question set itself dynamic. So if there are particular capabilities or certifications that are not applicable to that supplier because of the kind of things they do and the kind of products they sell, we won't ask this question. So for example, if they don't do waste management, we'll ask them if they do waste management. If they don't, we won't ask those extra questions around broker's license, etc. Equally around the product itself as well. So rather than asking all suppliers if they've got a PEFC or FSC supplier, we'll ask them the kind of products that they sell, and if they manage or sell timber in any way, then we'll prompt those extra questions for that. So it's very much a tailored question set. And it picks up on those key topics that you wouldn't see in the subcontractor plans, which we'll go through in a second. It also means that you've got one process. So rather than having a separate process for your suppliers as compared to subcontractors, by having this supplier specific plan, you can manage them all in one place. So if you're looking at your analytics within the platform, or you're looking at your supply chain compliance, you can do that all in one place on the platform. And you can also understand some of those supplier specific issues. So, where there are particular risks for your business in terms of continuity, understanding what they are, how would any kind of disruption impact your supply chain, but equally, are there any potential reputational issues that, if you've got products that are not sourced in an ethical way, may impact on your own business. And as I said before, it's making use of that all within the one Constructionline platform. Okay, so the plan itself is now available through the new portal. We'll go into that, as I said, in a bit more depth in a second. We've opted for a 2-level approach in a similar way that we have with silver and gold. And the reason we've done that is that the feedback we had when we looked at the question set was that depending on your requirements, depending on potentially where they are in your supply chain, which tier they're in, or how strategically important, you may decide to ask more questions or fewer questions. We have 2 levels that reflect that. It's all based on industry requirements. So as I said before, this question set's been built specifically for this purpose, and that tailoring of the requirements and the specifics that you need to know of those suppliers will mold over time as things change. And again, it's all managed in one platform, so that when you're looking at your overall compliance, you can do so for your subcontractors and your suppliers, all within one place. Okay, so again, what we're looking to do ultimately is produce that similar effect that we have on the subcontractor side. So based on the conversations we've been having with both the suppliers themselves as well as the main contractors, there are particular questions that we'll be asking of your suppliers that potentially would come from a number of different sources. So the same main contractor will be asking the same questions of the same suppliers, and they'll have to complete those questionnaires, those pre-qualification questionnaires, and submit them to the various main contractors. What we're looking to do through this is create one standard where they complete it once in exactly the same way we do with the subcontractor side. Complete it once, make it visible to all the main contractors, and reduce that burden of effort of having to complete multiple question sets. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to touch on the kind of key differences, and I'm going to do so at a fairly high level, and then we'll look at a few more topics in a bit more depth. But at the heart of the question set, there are some questions that are common to all of our question sets that we asked. So things like identity, so who are you? What are the products that you manage? Sorry, what were your branch officers rather? Who are your directors? What's your company's house number, your UTR number? All those kind of key company information we still ask. Now, at the moment, with these subcontractor plans, sit separately from the supplier plans. But if you complete, for example, any of these questions, you have to do so once. There's no duplication of efforts. If you've completed identity as an associate and you upgrade to a materials plan, those questions will still be populated. There's no need to then enter that information again. All you need to do is submit a verification. It'll be checked by the client services team, and they'll verify it for you. We also ask information on financials in exactly the same way we do with the subcontractor plans, and similarly with insurances. When we start to look at things like corporate and professional standing and health and safety, we start to see some differences where the question set is lighter on the supplier side. Whereas with the subcontractor plans, for a gold level, for example, a SSIP is required. That's not required from a subcontractor plan. And then we start to look at things like environmental, corporate social responsibility, which is asked of all suppliers. So whereas in the subcontractor world, corporate social responsibility is a requirement only of gold, because those questions around things like anti-slavery were deemed sufficiently important, we ask those at both the material standard and the plus level as well, and the plus and the premier level as well. We've also got chain of custody as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to look in a bit more depth at some of the areas that we capture and maybe some of the feedback as to why we've done those. So equal opportunities and diversity is something that we ask as part of the premier level that we ask. Environmental management goes into a lot more detail. So whereas on the subcontractor side, this is a fairly relatively light question set, there's extra levels of detail we go to. So one of the bits of feedback we had was that from a materials perspective, some suppliers will supply things, but they'll also pick things up from site and they'll dispose of them. So we ask the supplier if they are engaged with that activity, and in the event that they are, we'll then ask them to provide information on their carriers and brokers license as applicable. One of the other areas that we're also looking at is carbon footprint, and I don't know, Patricia, whether you want to mention anything on this, but I know this is an area that you're potentially looking at from your point of view as well.
Yes, we are. As a contractor, we are looking at the zero emissions focus in line with legislation, and I'm sure every one of us on this call would be an important topic to us all. So we are considering this within our materials package in development with Constructionline. So yes, thank you, Tom.
Perfect. No, thank you. And I think as well, things like energy sustainability and reducing as well. So this is all really geared towards an extra level of detail at the environmental side. So, you know, what are they doing to reduce the carbon footprint, energy sustainability? How are they reducing, reusing, recycling their products? So, you know, what's recyclable? What are they using that comes from recycled source? So all those kind of extra level of questions that we're asking as part of it. We then got information quality management. So again, that's available at the higher level, and corporate social responsibility and ethical sourcing. So just extra questions around, you know, human trafficking statements, CSR policy as well. And I know, again, Trish, from your perspective as well, that kind of social value piece is also of interest to you.
So we recently engaged in a social value conversation with Constructionline with their social value champion inputting into the question set, and we believe this is a very important topic for moving forward. Yeah,
perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then we've got delivery performance as well. So this is again things that we ask of the higher level, but things like transport and haulage. And again, there's all trigger questions. So are you involved with transport in any way? If you are, then we'll ask, you know, have you got things like a clocks or FORS accreditation that helps you support that? So this is all kind of tailored as applicable to the kind of products they sell. And then we've got chain of custody, which is clearly we ask that as part of that'll be covered rather as part of any kind of FSC accreditation they have on the timber side, but we also ask a more general question around the paper trail from source to kind of site. And then we've also got importing as well. So Trish and I earlier in the call were talking about some extra complexities as well in a post-Brexit world around getting things into the UK and extra considerations around that as well. Cool.
Yep. Some challenges around some paperwork and things like that, I think there is for many suppliers. So yes, it's something that we're paying attention to detail on.
Yeah, and within that as well, we do ask questions around have they got an EORI number, which is a requirement of anyone bringing things through. Equally, things around how duty is paid for as well. So is it done via a statement or is it done the point of delivery? So there's extra questions we ask there and considerations that now that we're no longer part of the EU, maybe things that we didn't have to think quite so carefully about. Okay, so that's kind of what we've done, what it's about. What I'm going to do now is just show you one of our suppliers that we've currently got verified to the materials plus level. So what we can see here is that in exactly the same way that you can search for any supplier, I can search for my materials suppliers. So if I go to find supplier and select continue, if I go for a search within my supply chain, I can either search by the existing subcontractor levels, as well as a few other newly introduced levels, but I can also search for Materials Plus and Materials Premier as well. So if I want to find suppliers on there, I can do it that way. I can also do it via a search in exactly the same way that you can today. The information we display is the same in terms of the company overview, are they in your supply chain, their size, etc. We've got a new icon for materials, so it's a sort of diamond shape icon which differentiates it from the subcontractor levels. If you go to the compliance itself, you can start to see who those suppliers are, and you can start to look at the detail behind it. So as I said earlier, from a question set perspective, we still ask the key information in terms of who they are, their financials and their insurances. But when we start to look at things like health and safety, we start to see differences. So the question set itself is lighter. We do ask for things like a drug and alcohol policy, though, as well as a policy information, whether or not they've got a third party SSIP, but that's not a requirement, as also a risk assessment for the kind of works they do. We've also got corporate and social responsibility. So here we've got the existing corporate and social responsibility question set, which we ask of gold subcontractors, and we've also got ethical sourcing. So these are extra questions around things like, are they part of the ethical trading initiative, for example. We've then got transport and delivery as well. So we ask extra information about essentially bringing the goods to site. And as I said earlier, we triggered these off there'll be a trigger question at the beginning. So are they involved with bringing products to site? Be yes, no. In the event that it's a yes, we trigger extra questions. If it's a no, then we don't ask the questions. We keep the question set as tailored as possible, depending on the kind of products and the activities they get involved with. Okay, so that's a fairly quick demonstration. What I'd like to do now is stop sharing my screen and have a look and see if there's any questions that have been raised. Okay, I don't think I can see any questions in the chat. If you've got any, we'll give you another few seconds to raise any questions. If not, I'll hand back over to Mike. Okay, nothing's come through. So Mike, shall I? In fact, one question has come through. Yeah. Yes, so there's a question here about costs. We can share that information, but it's broadly in line with the costs on the subcontractor side. So it's aligned with silver and gold. Is actually, if anything, slightly cheaper on both those sides because there's not an SSIP requirement on them. So it's broadly in line with that, but we can share the information on the pricing table. In fact, if you go to our website, we've now got a page where you can see what the pricing is for material suppliers as well as subcontractors. So you can go there to have a look. Yes, you could search. So the question here about can you search for material standard and plus? So the plus and the premier levels. Yes, you can. In my particular interface, I don't have that, but yes, absolutely, you can search for both levels in the same way you can search for gold as well as silver. Okay, so I think that's all the questions that come through. I'm just going to share my screen and hand back over to Mike.
All right, thank you, Tom. So I hope you found that useful and informative. And Trish, thank you very much again for taking the time this morning to join us and share your own experiences and the reasons why this is particularly an area that's important for many contractors or main contractors to be looking at. Constructionline Talks continues, and the next topic, I think at the end of the month, is going to be looking at buyer connections and risk policy manager. So the portal that you're currently using supports connections between your business and the subcontractors and now material suppliers in your supply chain. Using the buyer connection options in collaboration with the segments helps you identify which subcontractors are linked to specific projects, regions, trades, however you want to organize your supply chain within the Constructionline platform. And also, if you choose to do so, set different assessment criteria. So you may have a project that is particularly high risk or high value. You may be looking for everybody on that supply chain and project to be accredited to gold. But equally, you may have subcontractors working on other projects where silver may be appropriate. Or you might want to put all your material suppliers into a particular segment and keep a track of those. You can choose to keep it internal just for your own organizational benefit, or you can make it public to your supply chain so that they actually are aware of the requirements that you have of them and the particular criteria. We found in the past that that has helped the supply chain really understand why it is that they are taking a particular accreditation, because they're working with one of the main contractors and they need to be compliant. The risk policy manager side of things is really a way to set up notifications and get alerted to any changes to that supply chain, be it additions, subcontractors falling out of accreditation, or indeed those that have just got themselves verified. But it allows you to tailor the notifications that you specifically wanted to be alerted to. So you don't have to necessarily receive notifications for any changes across the entire supply chain, just those segments and projects that you've set up to monitor directly yourself. And you can choose to have real-time notifications or notifications that will come through to you at the end of the day in a summary form. So look out for the invitations that'll be coming through on that next topic. Tom, I think we've got a few more questions that may have come through.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. So there's one question here about, does supplier categories cover manufacturers? So it's a really very good point, actually. So one of the things that we're doing as part of this exercise is to expand our product categories out further, and the feedback we've had is that that should also include manufacturers. So in the same way that we do for other product types, if they get involved with activity of manufacturing, there will be specific questions we'll be looking to ask around things like CE markings, for example. So that certainly is something that we're looking to cover. And there's a question here about, do you provide guidance and for material suppliers, and what's expected with each compliance section? Again, a really good question. So we've got supporting documents that are available via the website that go through how to get accredited specifically for the materials plans. So we have a certain amount of supplier guidance and checklists which have been updated specifically for materials. So that'll help anyone going through that process.
I think, Tom, also the questions themselves carry guidance. So there's a little bit of explanatory guidance text with the questions that makes it obvious to anybody completing the section what it is that's required of them in order to become compliant.
Absolutely. There's also a question here about Experian credit checks. So we work with a party called Company Watch, which essentially do the very similar to Experian in terms of credit checks. If that's something that's of interest to you, that's something we can talk to you about further. We have a whole array of analytics as well that will give you visibility of that kind of credit scoring information. If that's something that's of interest, we can certainly talk to you about that further.
And Tom, I don't know whether you picked up on the fours and clocks question.
Yes, so the answer is yes. So is fours and clocks considered in the question set? Absolutely it is. That's going to be a trigger question. So if they get involved with, I think we touched on it earlier, but there's a question around, do you get involved with delivery of on site? We then ask questions around whether or not it's done by themselves, whether it's done by a third party. And then, yes, we'll trigger questions around what fleet management scheme do you have? Is it fours, clocks? And there's also a few others as well they can select from. Perfect. I think that's all the questions. So thank you for submitting those.
Okay, so thank you everybody for attending this morning. Hopefully that's been informative. As I said at the beginning, we have taken a recording and you'll get a copy of that or a link to the recording via email either later today or early in the next few days, so that you can play back anything, particularly any answers to the questions. And I look forward to welcoming you to the next Constructionline Talks in a couple of weeks' time.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.